I was in a room a lot like this one. I was one of a couple hundred people in a couple hundred seats, all with almost a couple hundred different places where I would rather be. I mean, we've all been there. You see, where lethargy was a noxious gas pouring out of air vents and boredom somehow seemed to take physical form, I could see it creeping in through the walls. I sat there, sinking into my seat as if the center of the universe was located directly below me. I patiently waited for the immense force of this gravity to finish fusing my atoms with the ones in my chair. I became nothing more than an ornament in an audience. It was just one of those days. The speaker made her appearance on stage, and as I had been raised, I ritually prepared to feign my attention for the next 60 minutes. I admit, I'm not that good at it. I was unaware, however, that this woman was much more than what she seemed. She was, in fact, a sorceress. As class began, she immediately began to cast enchantments on me and the rest around me. With each spell, she was muttering incantations of global warming, air pollution, oil spills, and fracking. With every spell, more and more of my peers fell into an uncontrollably deep slumber. I watched as buzzwords had the ability of opening up multiple Facebook tabs across the room. I tried, fighting off her voodoo by creating a mental checklist of cliché spells I assumed she would try using next, but her environmental hex was way too powerful to defend against. It increased first the force of gravity on my eyelids, and then quickly the weight of my entire skull until I had almost completely slipped into unconsciousness. I learned that apathy is one hell of a depressant. Now, I caught myself just from falling and managed to hear a term that I hadn't fit into my cliche list of terms that I expected to hear. Environmental injustice was a word that was foreign to me. It refers to the unequal distribution of environmental hazards, the ways in which poor communities are set aside as sacrifice zones for industrial poisons. I was appalled to learn that the very place where some must labor to sustain their lives is the very same workplace working to kill them. We pay for light in our world, not taking into account that the dollars we spend are darkening someone else's. There is blood in my checkbook. We live in a society that through ignorance permits those in power to gamble with human lives because they are considered less collateral damage, sacrifice zones, where some lives are deemed less worthy of living. Now, I had been under the impression that treating someone as only a fraction of a human being was something that ended with the 13th Amendment and civil rights decades ago, but apparently I was gravely mistaken. In Harlem, toxic emissions from its industrial facilities have raised local asthma levels to be some of the highest in the nation. In Brownsville, Texas, there is a woman whom in 9 months has created one of the most heartbreaking stories we have ever had the disgrace to co-author. A stillborn is a devastating tragedy. A whole series of children born without brains is a catastrophe. Causing anencephaly is a crime which deserves no amnesty. Her story is not a case study. Yet so many of us sit, so detached from that which does not directly affect us that we find no cause to affect change. Ignoring the change in our wallets when we pay for 25% of the world's energy, yet hold only 5% of its population. There is blood in my back pocket. While a disproportionately large number of lower-income families breathe in the bane of our own negligence, I stand ashamed, not just in myself, but in our whole society and in our indifference as a student population. I heard once that apathy is the glove into which evil slips its hand. I can find no better example of this than in our reactions to all utterances and whispers of concerns for our environment. We live in a time where so many of us, myself was included, was content with a system of zero accountability for our apathy, where Mother Earth was just a foolish deity for hippies and Captain Planet was a worse superhero than Aquaman, where pipelines were misconstrued as lifelines and environmental issues were so contested along political lines that many of us reached an all too comfortable standstill between red and blue. We ignore all who suffer by breathing in our mistakes, drinking our disregard, and feeding on our faults. It is ironic that energy is what we need to survive, but our quest for it causes so many to die. We should care, but so many of us don't. In the last 35 days alone, there have been 13 oil spills on 3 continents, 10 of which were in North America, 8 of which were in the United States, ranging from 157 barrels lost by human error to 12,000 barrels leaked in an Exxon pipeline rupture in the last month alone. We have spilt more than 1,200,000 gallons of oil and toxic chemicals into our communities. Why do we still not care about this? I am beginning to heavily question my own complacency. When words all too often put us to sleep, what will it finally take to wake us up? When the poor have little power to speak up for themselves, the burden falls upon us. And yes, I know that this is heavy, but that is because our decisions today hold weight, and those decisions are inhibiting our own greatness. We are indirectly killing others, spreading cancers to the disadvantaged, and I am no longer comfortable with the blood that is leaking out of our bark account. I admit that I don't have the answers. I'm only just beginning to ask these questions, and there are a near infinite number of problems with the world today, but continuing to do nothing about it is greatly limiting our progression. We cannot change the world in a day. And I am asking no one to run riots or burn down banks, but when our apathy is the soil from which evil grows, we've got some gardening to do. And we can make this world greener, and we can make this place better. We pay in others' blood, but we can't seem to pay attention. John Dos Passos claimed that the cure for apathy is comprehension. We stand on the edge of a movement, so we must stop sinking into our chairs, because the first step for any great movement is simply to get the people to care. Thank you.
Hello, UCSB. Welcome. Welcome to all to Energy Reclaim the Name. Can we get another hand for Ryan Yamamoto? We are so glad that you can make it to this evening discussion of clean energy. If you thought you were coming to see that new movie with Seth Rogen, this is the end. We're sorry, but you came to the wrong spot.
But no worries, because this is the beginning. We put together this event to spark a conversation about energy. After all, that's what our society is based on. But we also wanted to point out that the issue isn't one-sided. We can't just put a whole bunch of solar panels on the U Center or the gym, nor can we just divest our money from the fossil fuel industry. We have to work as a society to move away from the fossil fuels toward a brighter, cleaner future, but that's all fine. We know what we need to do, but how?
Well, our three keynote speakers tonight are going to be answering that how. And if they didn't answer the specific questions you have, there will be a panel at the end where you can actually text in your questions, and they will address your concerns. But we'll get to that part later. And if you want to just get to know them a little bit better, we will have a short reception following where you'll actually get to know the speakers.
Yes, and if you want to text in your questions, the number to text is on the program at the bottom, so feel free to text anytime throughout the presentations. So before we get started, we need to set some ground rules. So in case of an emergency or an oil spill, we have exits right there and at the ends. And we also ask that you refrain from eating or drinking, as food is not permitted in Campbell Hall. Also, please be sure to turn off or silent your cell phones.
Well, this is great. It does look like we've got a pretty diverse audience tonight, which is fantastic because this is what we need. We need collaboration between students, faculty, staff, and community members in order to change the way we view energy. So why this event? Why now?
So tonight's event is called Energy Reclaim the Name, and it's presented by the Environmental Affairs Board. And it is a culmination of two of EAB's campaigns. The first one is UC for Clean Energy, and the second one is UCSB Fossil Free.
So, UCSB Fossil Free is part of a nationwide movement with more than 300 participating universities, as well as various other institutions. The movement is working to get institutions to divest from fossil fuels, and by doing so, sort of making a statement that says it is morally wrong to benefit financially off the suffering of others and the degradation of the environment. But hold up, what is divestment? Divestment is the idea that you take all your money away from one institution and you reinvest it in another. And that could be for any sort of social, personal, or environmental reasons. What we're looking at UCSB, however, is we're not just trying to go after UCSB's endowment pool. We are working with all the other UCs in the system and going and asking the regions to divest their money. So divestment is just a tactic, though. What we're really aiming for is to get climate justice. UCSB Fossil Free started here in summer of 2012, and since then, we've had quite a few successes. We unanimously passed a resolution through the Associated Students Senate in support of divestment. And you might be interested to know that actually 4 other UCs have done the same thing, so we're now at half the UCs. Additionally, our very own academic senate, or the faculty senate, has passed a resolution to start a series of discussions about divestment. Also, we've been in the Nexus multiple times. I think I've counted 5. We've been in the bottom line. We sent students to a nationwide convergence at Swarthmore, Pennsylvania to talk about divestment. Additionally, we've been featured on NPR's On Point. And on May 14th, we, the students of the UCs, from all the UCs, are going to Sacramento to ask the Regents for divestment.
Okay, so the second campaign is called UC for Clean Energy, and just 7 months ago, a group of students gathered in an awkward conference room to discuss the potential of a clean energy movement right here at UCSB. With wide eyes and scattered minds, UC for Clean Energy was born to get our campus and ultimately the entire UC system to adapt a 100% clean energy policy. Once a distant dream, in just 7 months, UC for Clean Energy has gathered nearly 20% of the entire student body's support, has presented to the Chancellor's administration, and has created a strong proposal composed of economic, social, and environmental research. We have been recognized by the campus papers and environmental prophets around the nation, including Greenpeace USA. We have sent students to participate in the largest climate rally in U.S. history, and we have turned a mere dream into a plausible reality. The amount of support we have received behind this cause has been humbling yet incredible, not only by the students, but by the faculty and professors as well. Tomorrow morning, we will be sitting with the Chancellor's Board of Sustainability to discuss our next steps in getting UCSB to commit to 100% clean energy. So wish us luck. I would personally like to thank you all for attending this event tonight, because in September of this year, I had an idea to change a school right here at UCSB, and today we have a plan to change the world. It has truly been the most incredible and empowering experience of my life, and I'm so happy to have you all here tonight. By choosing to step into these doors, you are being welcomed into a world that is eager to empower you to realize your potential in the journey of changing the way we live our lives. It is time we become dissatisfied. It is time we are no longer content. It is time we ask the questions and search for the answers that contain peace and justice. So without further ado, I give you energy, reclaim the name.
Hello, I am Lauren Dykman, and I am the event planning chair for the Fossil Free campaign. Before we invite our first speaker, David Austin, onto stage, I want to take a moment to say how fortunate we are to have such a brilliant mind working on our campus. David is the executive director of the Institute for Energy Efficiency and Center for Energy Efficient Materials at UCSB. Not only has David overseen the growth of the Institute and the construction of a new building dedicated solely to the research of energy efficient materials, David has also volunteered to be the leader on the Chancellor's Sustainability Task Force. Just as Santa Barbara fostered the beginnings of the environmental movement with the first Earth Day, David and the Institute continue to be leaders in revolutionary energy efficient research. We hope that UCSB will continue to lead the world in promoting living in harmony with the environment and improving our own quality of life through efficient, sustainable energy.
Good evening. I'm Ross Sellen, and I'm the research chair for UC for Clean Energy. Over the course of the last year, I have had the opportunity to work with numerous faculty members like David, who have helped tremendously in drafting our comprehensive proposal. Clean energy is one of the great unifiers on this campus because it requires all of us to push the boundaries of innovation, to leave a better legacy. The most beautiful thing about the Institute and UCSB as a whole is the collaborative spirit that emanates and fuels this clean energy movement. David's dedication and passion continues to inspire me because of his commitment to overcoming the engineering hurdles in front of a 100% clean energy future. The Institute's incredible research on solar cells, energy storage, and transmission continues to amaze me. David and his team have formed the blueprints to success by continuing to push the limits. I would like everyone to help me welcome David to the stage by giving me the enthusiastic hand he deserves.
Well, it was my generation that got us in this mess, and I just have to say that I am very heartened by the fact that the younger generation cares as much as you do about getting us out of it, because it's going to be enormously difficult. The work that we're doing at our institute is only a small part of a very, very large and challenging issue. And I don't intend to match Ryan's passion. That's something that I might have done 50 years ago when I was at Berkeley. But instead, I'm going to play the straight man this evening and give you just a little tutorial on energy and hopefully give you a few pieces of information you haven't seen before that will not only enlighten you, but help you understand just not only how important this issue is, but how challenging it is. And in particular, I'm going to talk about 5 reasons. We only need one, but it turns out there's more than one reason why we need to stop using fossil fuels. And here they are. The first, which is actually the basis of a lot of the work in our institute, is purely economic, and that is that we waste an enormous amount of energy, and I'm going to give you some information that will support this claim. The second, we all know, is the environmental issue, which is enormously important because of the greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels. But also there's the sustainability issue. And the way I like to look at sustainability is that it took our planet hundreds of millions of years to form fossil fuels, but yet we are depleting them in a matter of a few hundred years, just a few generations. And there's something, I think, fundamentally wrong with the fact that what is it about our period of time in the history of our planet that gives us the right to do that? It just doesn't strike me as being correct. Then there's also the question of national security. A lot of our oil and gas, as you know, comes from countries that are not especially our best friends. And lastly, and I want to show you some data on this, is the health issue. It's underestimated just how serious this problem is. How much energy do we actually need? Most people, I mean, does anybody have the answer? I've got it up here, so I can tell you. But it's something that you may not be aware of, but if you take the food that you eat each day, which as a human being is really all the energy you need to exist as a human, everything else is extra and superfluous. All your iPads, your cars, your TV is extra. But if you take just that basic metabolic energy based on the food you absorb each day, which is on average about 2,500 kilocalories, and it's kilocalories. The dietitians dropped a factor of 1,000. If you live in Europe, you'll know that it's kilocalories, not calories. That's equivalent to an average power of about 120 watts, or 1 light bulb. The human body is enormously efficient in terms of its use of energy. But if you were to compare that, which I show here, to the total amount of energy that we use per person on average due to everything we do, the automobiles we drive, the planes we fly in, all our electronic gear and everything else, it turns out that it's about 100 times that figure. In other words, on average, we consume about 12,000 watts of power per person. Now you can look at this different ways. That's an enormous figure. Some people would say, well, that's a measure of the sophistication of our civilization. Others would perhaps say that's not. We also emit about 0.2 to 0.3 metric tons of carbon dioxide a year, but the cows do a better job than we do on that. The historical trend is really quite remarkable. You probably can't see this, but this is a plot. This is years, going back about 150 years. And you don't have to go back too far in history to see that our current thirst for energy really is something that evolved very dramatically and very rapidly over the past 100 to 200 years. And most of it is fired by fossil fuels. 85% of it's fossil fuels. Hydroelectric is really the only renewable that shows up on this graph, and it's a very small percentage. Now, this is the kind of slide that if you're a faculty member and you teach a course, you should never show because it'll put people to sleep. I want to show it to you because it's enormously important, because what it does is it gives you a picture of how, not only how we use energy, but where it comes from. On the left are sources of energy, all the fossil fuels lined up here, oil, biomass, coal, and natural gas, geothermal, wind, hydro, nuclear, and solar. And the thickness of the lines coming out of these is proportional to the amount of energy from each one. You can't see solar, it's such a tiny amount. It's also yellow. We use the energy from these sources for different purposes, the main one being to generate electricity, and that's a biggie. We use it in our homes for lighting and heating. We use it for commercial applications, industrial applications, and transportation. And the slide is actually a little short here, but what I have on the right here is the fraction of energy that is usefully used, that is put to work for us. And this is the amount of energy that's wasted. Every year, we waste more energy than we put to use by doing good work for us in these various ways. And this ratio, which is currently about 45 to 55%, that is 55% waste and 45% useful, is actually getting worse as time evolves. If you were to look at this picture and ask what was the story 50 years ago, we were close to about wasting only half, which is still unacceptable. Now, some of that waste is inevitable because there's some theoretical limits in terms of just how much energy you can squeeze out of a coal-driven power plant. But the estimates that the Department of Energy and others, many scientists have made, is that we could reclaim at least 30% of that waste energy through more efficient utilization of technology. That's not only straightforward, but is actually doable. Here's a further illustration just to emphasize the point I was making about waste and energy. This follows the paths from a study the National Academy of Sciences did recently, where this is your average 1 to 2 gigawatt coal-fired power plant. And if we ask the question, what happens to trace the energy? Let's say we put 100 units of coal, that is 100 units of energy in coal into this power plant. We get typically only about 38 units of electricity coming out, goes over the lines, we lose about 2 units there, comes in your home, and if you use that to fire an incandescent, to drive an incandescent light bulb, you get only 2 units of energy of light out of it. Everything else is thrown away. And in our institute, we're addressing many of these problems. First, we're looking at new and advanced light-emitting diodes. And in fact, UCSB is a world leader in that area. The LEDs that are used for lighting originated in the research laboratories here at UCSB. And it's estimated that if LEDs were to become the common standard of lighting, we could take offline about 50 electric power plants. That's an enormous number, and the consequent emissions that go with them. We're also looking at new ways to save power in terms of how we transmit it, as well as how we generate it. We have major programs, as Ross mentioned, in solar energy sources. Here's just some further examples. As I said, electric power plants on average give you only about 30 to 35 units of energy for every unit, 100 units of energy you put into them. Another very inefficient and energy-gobbling device that we all love is our internal combustion engine. These are typically only about 25% efficient, meaning that the energy that is contained in the gasoline that you burn, only about 1/4 of it actually is translated into mechanical motion, energy of movement. Electric vehicles, on the other hand, are about 95% efficient. The electric motor is enormously more efficient than is a gasoline engine. Our buildings are also very inefficient. The average building, it estimates, wastes as much as 50% of the energy deployed for heating and lighting in it. So there are enormous opportunities. Even before you get to climate change as an argument, there are enormous opportunities and arguments for saving energy. Another issue is, that I want to touch on here is global access to energy. As was pointed out by Ryan, this is a very big issue because, just a couple of statistics here, about 1.4 billion people in the world have no access to electricity whatsoever. Most of them are using kerosene as a source of lighting and cooking, which is a terribly dirty material and is causing enormous problems of respiratory illness. I'll give you a couple of examples just to illustrate this point. In particular, if you look at rural areas, very large percentages of the population, as high as 80%, in countries such as India, are actually using biomass, mostly kerosene and wood, in their homes to cook, to heat, and to as a source of lighting. And the big problem here, as the World Health Organization has pointed out, is that the carbon particulate matter coming from burning fossil fuels is enormously damaging to your lungs. It's like sitting in a room with a diesel engine running all the time. And it's been estimated that smoke from biomass is causing almost as many premature deaths worldwide as is HIV/AIDS today. And these figures, the most current ones are for 2008, but projected ahead, it's estimated that unless something dramatically happens, smoke from biomass will actually exceed the deaths from HIV/AIDS. This is one of my favorite photographs, but it also illustrates dramatically the unequal distribution of energy, in this case lighting. This is an actual composite photo from NASA, from satellites, showing where electricity is. These are actual lights glowing at night, mostly traffic lights and other sources, and it's composite, so it's the whole planet is shown at night. And you can see there are very large, almost entire continents, such as Africa, which are almost completely dark, and very large parts of South America as well. One of the things we're doing to try to address this issue is to distribute a very simple lighting device to developing countries. This consists of a solar cell and an LED light and a battery. And what students do with this is they put it outside during the day in the sun. It charges up, and then they can use it at night for 2 to 3 hours to do their homework. And it pays for itself in about 2 months. It costs only $7 to make, and we have a number of foundations that are supporting that cost. And it's being distributed, as I said, throughout the world in some 20 to 30 countries now. As many as 40 to 50,000 of these are actually in use, and our goal is to put even more around the world. One of the arguments that you will hear about alternative energy from the opposition, from those who feel that, hey, there's no crisis, what are you so worried about, is that the cost of renewables are excessive, and they'll never compete with fossil fuels. But that overlooks a very well-known phenomenon in technology, and that is that as the quantity and the development of a technology progresses in time, those costs consistently go down. And this is a curve of that trend. Average cost for solar panels in, this is installed cost, dollars per watt. If you go back to 1976, it was prohibitive. It was $65 a watt, which is not at all practical. But with time, as the cumulative manufacturing capacity increased, this has come down to the point now where it's very close to $1 a watt. And $1 a watt is actually very competitive with fossil fuels. And the prediction is that this will continue to go down further as solar becomes more widespread in its use. This is a special program that the Department of Energy has developed called Sunshot. Steve Chu, who is the secretary, said we need something comparable to the Apollo program, the Moonshot, and he called this the Sunshot program. Its goal was to get that cost of solar energy down to $1 a watt. And as I said, this was started about 3 years ago, and it's almost at its target now. And will likely result in much more widespread of solar. We hear a lot about hydraulic fracking, and I wanted to make a couple of comments about it. First, the enormous amount of hyperbole that's out there. You will hear people, don't need to quote any specific individuals, but there are many people who believe now that the discovery of not only a new method of bringing oil and gas out of the earth, but the fact that there are large deposits of oil and natural gas within the United States means that the energy crisis is over, that we can just forget about all this stuff and just continue to burn fossil fuels. There are a couple of serious problems, however, as most of you know, and it has to do with a number of things. First of all, just taking the case of natural gas is a fossil fuel, and although it produces somewhat less, about half the greenhouse gas emissions that oil does, it is nevertheless producing sizable numbers of greenhouse gases. But more important, there's the problem of two environmental issues. One, which is very complicated because the jurisdiction is by the states, and that is groundwater contamination. The federal government has virtually no jurisdiction over that issue, and it's a major problem in terms of setting standards. States are competing with each other to produce as much natural gas by fracking as possible. The third issue is methane leakage. Natural gas is largely methane, and methane is about 25 to 35 times more powerful greenhouse gas than is carbon dioxide. And it's been estimated that if, as a lot of people are advocating, that coal electric power plants are replaced by natural gas plants, which is the case in California, by the way. We have no coal-fired power plants in California. But in the rest of the country, coal is still the dominant source of fuel for electric generation. If you were to replace those with natural gas, you would reduce the carbon dioxide emissions, and that would be a gain. But you would only be ahead of the game if you were to hold the methane leakage to a figure of somewhere between 2 and 3%. And 2 and 3% is actually pretty close to what the industry claims it's doing right now, meaning it would be a wash. And there's a lot of recent data that suggests that the figure is actually substantially higher than that. So that this is something that could be a major problem, as we all know. But there's a lot of important science that hasn't been done here to determine just, one, how much leakage of methane occurs, not only at the wellhead, but in transport, and then at the source where it's used, at the place where it's used. The other, of course, is the groundwater contamination issue, which is fraught with legal and political problems. The problem is that hydraulic fracturing is going ahead, and our transition to natural gas is occurring right as today, and it's moving very, very fast. There's a lot of discussion about the possibility that Transportation, especially heavy-duty transportation, large trucks will soon all be running on natural gas. And there's a fair segment of people who believe that we don't need renewable energy because we have natural gas. That would be a very, very unfortunate circumstance if that developed. It would put us all behind a very, very long time. And we can't just stop our work on renewable energy and pick it up 25 years from now. We'll lose it if that happens. So this is something to watch very, very closely. There's enormous momentum, and don't underestimate the power of the forces at work here to convert to natural gas in a very large way and to put aside renewable energies. I think Tom Friedman probably had the best compromise recommendation when he recommended that in the short term, perhaps we might use more natural gas, just as we do in California for generating our electricity throughout the rest of the country, but that we put a tax on it so that, and we use that tax to develop renewables so that when the natural gas, assuming it can be determined to be environmentally sound, when the natural gas is depleted and long before, we have the renewables that we need. So let me just conclude there by just summarizing. I love this cartoon because the opposition to everything that we're doing tends to be rather vocal in not wanting to do anything. There are a whole lot of great reasons to make this a better world, and pursuing alternative energy, renewables, is certainly one of them. We actually do, in our institute, a summit conference, which will be next week. And if any of you would like to go, I have some information here for you. We have some wonderful keynote speakers, including the outgoing Secretary of Energy, Stephen Chu, and others who will be talking about many aspects of renewable energy, mostly about the science and technology, but also about some of the policy issues. And just as a parting word, I want to read this proverb to you, and that is, treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. That's a Native American proverb, and I think it's something we should keep in mind as we go forward. Thank you.
Let's give David Austin another round of applause. All right, so hello, I'm Isabel Gatesy, the Campaign Development Chair for UCCE.
And I'm Rachel Scarlett, the Environmental Justice Chair for EAB.
So we are very excited to introduce our environmental justice speaker for the night, Strela Surveys. Before we welcome her to the stage, though, we would like to explain why we all felt it to be such an imperative to speak about environmental justice tonight during this evening devoted to clean energy.
The EPA defines environmental justice as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, sex, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. But quite simply, environmental justice can be defined as reclaiming power over your community, power over your environment. It can be defined as refusing to allow industry and policymakers to subjugate those who they think lack the political capital to demand equal and fair treatment. The truth is, the power lies within the community. We all have the right to demand a safe environment.
When it comes down to it, environmental justice is about communities standing up to protect their families from the exploitation visited upon them by dirty energy companies. These are companies that see no issue with building a coal plant alongside a playground, causing the children of these communities to grow up with a disproportionate amount of health problems like asthma and cancer. Before you decide that UCSB students are too idealistic or too overreaching in their demands for clean energy, take a moment to recognize the strife that these communities face daily. It makes our goals look not only necessary, but long overdue. We are fighting alongside these communities to make sure a healthy environment is not a privilege for those who can pay,
but a right that all may access. Environmental justice is a fight for equality, and it is a righteous fight.
That is why we are so happy to have Strella Cervez here tonight. Strella is the coordinator of CEJA, the California Environmental Justice Alliance. CEJA is a statewide coalition of grassroots environmental justice organizations. Together, CEJA fights at the federal, state, regional, and local level for justice for members of low-income communities and communities of color. As a dynamic member of the environmental justice community, Strella works every day to end these wrongs and create a healthier, cleaner, and greener future. Please help us welcome to the stage, Strella Cervez.
I think it's the next one. Okay, there we go. Hello, UC Santa Barbara. Thank you to the Environmental Affairs Board of UCSB, UC for Clean Energy, and UCSB Fossil Free for inviting me here today. I am so excited to be on the campus of UC Santa Barbara. This is actually one of the only colleges that I know of that has an active energy campaign and is doing something about clean energy. So you should give yourselves a round of applause. And I'm proud to be in the city of Santa Barbara, where in 1969, the oil spill here in Santa Barbara inspired the first Earth Day, where on April 22nd in 1970, Earth Day actually began. And Earth Day wasn't just started with planting trees and kind of this feel-good stuff, which is all great and we need it as well, but it was about hundreds of thousands of people just like yourselves marching the streets, demanding a healthy, sustainable environment, and you all are carrying out the legacy. So congratulations to you all. So I work with the California Environmental Justice Alliance, as was mentioned. We're a grassroots coalition of people fighting for our rights for environmental justice. We're made up of community organizations up and down the state. We've got all those organizations that are listed up there, from Oakland to Los Angeles, San Diego, San Bernardino, the Inland Valley, the Central Valley, Richmond, and together we represent around 15,000 community members, and these are mostly community members that are low income, they're communities of color, and they're most impacted by environmental degradation. And what we really do is we work to bring the voices of these communities up to affect policy change, because they're usually shut out from the policy process. And we're making the environmental justice movement alive in California. So you may be asking yourself, what is environmental justice exactly? But before I talk about EJ, we must first understand what is environmental racism. So I'll give you an example. This is a boy named Kawayan. He's actually my friend's son. At the time that this picture was taken, he was about 6 or 7 years old. And he lives in Oakland, right next to big, dirty, polluting facilities. He suffers from asthma, and he has to use an inhaler pretty much every day. A lot of you probably know that West Oakland is located next to San Francisco's busiest ports, and it's trapped in between two major highways. Oakland continues to be one of the most polluted cities in America. It's got diesel fuel ships, diesel trucks, illegal dumping, and all the ramifications of the industrialized area add to the pollution of West Oakland's dirty air. So West Oakland is a community that's trying to deal with the pollution problem, but this predominantly poor African American community already faces problems with education, healthcare, and now pollution. And one report observed that the socioeconomic issues of the poor African American community in West Oakland play into what's called environmental racism. So with this rise of pollution, children in Oakland are 7 times more likely to get asthma than any other child in the state. And new health reports show numbers of children in the community are at a 20% increase for asthma cases, and it's as high as 37% in adults. So this is what we call environmental racism. And stories like Kawayan's is not a coincidence. It happens all the time. Here in California, we've identified some of the areas that have the highest rates of pollution, and these communities also happen to be low-income communities of color. These are all what we call environmental justice communities. And again, as was mentioned before, environmental justice is that all people, regardless of their race, color, national origin, or income, are able to enjoy equally high levels of environmental protection. EJ communities are commonly identified as residents that are mostly low income and are shut out of the decision-making process even by laws or policies that would mostly impact them the most. And they live right next to these dirty power plants, big oil refineries, expanding freeways, and other polluting facilities. And in fact, Black and Latinos in Los Angeles are 3 times more likely to live near environmental hazards than white communities. And people of color are 1.5 times greater at risk for cancer from air toxic exposure. So this here is a picture of Los Angeles. The statistics are kind of cut out, but you can see the areas that are most impacted by pollution and with the highest rates of unemployment happen to be low-income communities of color, and those are the areas in red. And this is, you'll see kind of the freeways, if you're familiar with LA, the 710, the 605, the 60, this is where I live. And these are called toxic hotspots. And so what we want to do is turn these red toxic hotspots into green zones where communities are transitioned off of fossil fuels. They are living healthy, they have green jobs, and these are resilient communities. So what is exactly dirty energy, and why should you care about this at all? I'm going to give you a few examples of what dirty energy really is and how it relates to environmental justice communities. This is a nuclear power plant, and nuclear is dirty because it uses a process called nuclear fission, which is really highly dangerous. It poses serious risks to the nearby communities. An accident at one of these can be incredibly devastating. At the San Onofre nuclear power plant on your way to San Diego, it's estimated that over 120,000 people could be killed, and thousands of acres would be contaminated because of the radiation that's so deadly that would come out of a nuclear power plant. Nuclear also uses uranium mining, and many environmental and health impacts to miners would result of it, and this especially impacts Native Americans, and it also pollutes our water. And another problem is nuclear waste. So this is another serious issue because weapons are developed from it, and it becomes dangerous for so long, and it actually takes hundreds of thousands to millions of years for it to decay. And then they create these sacrifice zones in places where the nuclear waste is all stored. So coal locally for many years was imported from places like New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. We get here in California, we get a lot of our coal from Arizona, and we still do, especially in LA. And the coal ranks among the highest of polluters, where we're importing much of the energy into California. Burning coal is one of the worst climate offenders when it comes to electricity generation. This is a picture of mountaintop removal, and I actually know communities that live in the Appalachia region. If you know some people, you might know some people as well. Mountaintop removal consists of clearing all the topsoil and vegetation on a mining site. Then they use explosives to blow up 500 to 800 feet of elevation off the mountaintops, digging up coal and debris, and then dumping the rocks and soil into nearby valleys and burying the streams and headwaters. The processing of coal creates this useless liquid called coal sludge that consists of toxic chemicals such as arsenic and mercury, lead, copper, and chromium. And this is a picture, if you can see down at the bottom, the circle on the bottom is the Marsh Fork Elementary School in West Virginia, which is located 150 feet just from the coal preparation plant and 400 feet below the leaking dam, holding 2.8 billion gallons of toxic coal sludge. Children attending this school frequently go home sick, suffering from asthma, severe headaches, blisters in their mouths, runny nose, and nausea, all of which is a result of the coal dust and the leaking dam. So what about natural gas? So as was mentioned earlier, natural gas is also a form of dirty energy. You might think, oh, you've heard of natural gas, it's good, it's renewable, and it's clean. It's actually a myth. And this is a picture of the Malberg Generating Station, also known as the Vernon Power Plant, which is where I work. This is located in southeast Los Angeles, right next to Bell and Commerce, Maywood, and East Los Angeles. According to the Vernon Power Plant's own studies, this power plant would have been directly responsible for at least 11 deaths every year and thousands of tons of fine soot particles linked to cancer, heart disease, and other illnesses that would have been emitted into the air. Large natural gas power plants like Vernon spew millions of tons of toxic emissions and emit particulate matter and nitrogen oxide, a harmful greenhouse gas that also causes smog. And this process also includes liquefied natural gas, which in other countries such as Indonesia, they're exploited and gas is brought to the US via tankers through Mexico. And the tanker and the terminals are also all very dangerous. And it's actually found that natural gas can potentially be just as dangerous or more dirty than coal. This is a picture of the Chevron refinery in Richmond. And this is a 2,900-acre petroleum refinery. It's owned and operated by the Chevron Corporation. It employs about 1,200 workers, making it the largest city's employer. And this processes approximately 240,000 barrels of crude every day. And they make gasoline, fuel, jet fuel, and diesel fuel. And for the second time in 5 years, a fire at Chevron refinery crude unit in Richmond had put workers and neighbors into critical danger. They admitted that this industrial disaster was their own fault, and they released toxic chemicals into the air. And as it turns out, 1,600 residents were reported to have visited the hospital with complaints of burning eyes, nose, throat headaches, and difficulty breathing. Some of the chemicals released during the fire have been shown to cause lung cancer and mostly trigger asthma. And I don't have a picture of another type of dirty energy, but it was mentioned earlier. It's called fracking. Over the weekend, I visited the Central Valley, the areas of Delano, Shafter, and they are actually building this beautiful community garden, and they're growing their own vegetables and fruit. And right next to the community garden, big corporations such as Chevron have invaded the space, and they've actually cleared the way to install fracking drills. So fracking is a huge problem. It's considered to be one of the next oil booms or gold booms in California. They just built this in the past 6 months, but it's the new technology where you can drill deeper and then out, and then it causes earthquakes. And there's even stories of when people, it affects the groundwater. So even people that put a match up to their water, their faucet, it actually lights up on fire. So it's going to be a huge problem. But that's another example of dirty energy. So then what is clean energy, and how does it relate to social justice? So this is an example of what clean energy is. It's energy efficiency. So this is not only about the technology, but it's about the communities that are most impacted. So this is a picture of workers from a program called Repower LA. It focuses on creating energy efficiency jobs for communities of color in Los Angeles, because there's this term called the green economy, and that the green economy is going to save our workers, and we're going to get put back to work with the green economy. But we usually don't see that in environmental justice communities, in low-income communities, and communities of color. And so what this program does is that it's reclaiming, what the theme of this conference is, it's reclaiming that and making sure that low-income communities and communities of color that are impacted the most actually benefit through a green jobs training program and actually accessing these jobs. This is an example of a large solar farm. And so this solar, you'll say, is, we love solar. We want more solar. It's a renewable type of energy. But this is an example of a massive solar farm that's usually put out in the desert. And even though this is a renewable type of energy, it's far away from poor urban and rural communities that need the solar the most. It also requires long transmission lines, as you saw previously. So the long transmission lines that you see on the freeway that transmit the energy from the either power plant or these solar farms into the areas that need it, those are actually really costly. And when you look at your energy bill, that's actually what you pay for, is you pay for those long transmission lines. And they're really costly, and you lose a lot of energy because of those long transmission lines. So this type of huge solar impacts pristine desert life and permanently damages the ecosystem in desert communities that is so vital to the rest of our own ecosystem. So even though we love solar, we want to see transition off of these huge solar farms out in the desert into more local solar into the local communities. So this is an example of a rooftop solar installation in Oakland. So this is where Kauaian's mom works. So remember the picture of the little boy with the mask on his face, the breathing apparatus on his face? This is where his mom works. So his mom's name is Mary Rose. She works at the Asian Pacific Environmental Network and in the building of the Asian Resources Center. So these solar panels are enough to power approximately 7 homes and will save the building over $100,000 over the lifetime of the lease. Low-income communities of color again, suffer first and worst from climate change, but these communities never see the benefits of it because, again, the solar farms are always put out in the desert. But through this is an example of what we want to see more. We want to see more solar on community areas, spaces, schools, multifamily buildings, commercial buildings, right in the area that needs it the most. And solar is great because it works during the day. There's a lot of myth out there that it doesn't work if it's overcast, but it actually does. And even in places like Portland and Seattle where there's a lot of overcast weather, solar is actually still working for you. This is an example of a wind turbine from the Southwest Wind Power as part of La Casa Verde, a sustainable residence made from recycled materials in San Francisco. So wind is actually clean fuel. It produces no air or water pollution because no fuel is burned to generate the electricity. And they're really inexpensive to build. So again, what we want to see is more of this type of local wind. You might see a lot of, if you drive through the desert, big wind farms. That's great, but again, it's the damage to the ecosystem, and we want to see something that's more local. So these more local wind installations right in communities that need it the most is what we want to see. So this movement is not just about slapping some solar panels on a building. It's not just about, what kind of technology, the best and brightest technology that we can bring in, but it's actually about changing the lives of everyday people, people who are suffering the most and whose kids are suffering. And this is an example of a community member. Her name is Maria Martinez. She lives in Barrio Logan in San Diego, California. She's lived there with her husband and her 3 sons for 16 years in an apartment complex called the Mercado Apartments. And it's situated in one of San Diego's largest mixed land use areas. So you've got the ports, you've got dirty energy next to her, you've got dirty freeways. And so as a result, the asthma rates in that area are the highest amongst children in the county. And Maria's oldest son has developed asthma at the age of 10. And a doctor has said that it's the pollution in the air that's related to Maria's son's asthma. And so it's because of examples like these that we're doing this and why we're involved in this movement. And this movement is not just about passing some legislation. I work with a lot of legislation and do a lot of policy, but it's not just about that. It's also about a movement that's led by our young people, all of you. This is about changing the system, because even if we have some energy efficiency and some solar panels, if the same system still exists, your generation and generations to come will still suffer. So it's not about, putting some solar panels up and Chevron and the utilities still being in control. It's about the communities benefiting the most, and it's youth like you here that need to be at the forefront of fighting for the rights of environmental justice. So this is a picture of youth from Communities for a Better Environment, where I work in Los Angeles. They participated in a march at a conference called Power Shift, and they're fighting for climate justice, and they were leading this march here, and they were at the very front. This movement is also about putting the power in your hands. It's you controlling your energy use and your energy future. Right now, we're sitting at the worst climate crisis in the history of the Earth, where climate change will wipe out entire communities, like how Superstorm Sandy did. Sandy is an example of why we need clean and secure energy. We want to build our own communities so that more Sandys don't happen again. Over a month after Superstorm Sandy hit, there were still parts of the East Coast that were without power. Luckily, there were these mobile solar projects. This one's called the Mojave 3 that assisted rescue efforts in New York and New Jersey. And this little solar array can be hooked up and it can supply energy to a hot food kitchen, a medical clinic, a ranger station, and a charging station for cell phones, flashlights, and other critical equipment. So this is really about communities taking control of their own energy. It's not controlled by the utilities and not controlled by the corporations. It's democratic, it's equitable. We want it to be in the communities that get hit hardest and first and worst. And we want communities to participate and access their own renewable energy. The future of the green economy and renewable energy will also impact you all sitting here, the youth, the most probably. Soon you'll be graduating and looking for jobs, and the green economy has this promise to, lift all the environmental and the unemployment burdens of the state. But we need to work really hard to make this happen. If we did it right, the potential to create hundreds and thousands of jobs for all of you right now who are graduating and who need work really rests in the green economy. There are so many green jobs training programs. There's an estimated 300 plus green jobs training programs in the state. And we've got all of these workers that are trained and ready to go. But there's a saying that they're actually all dressed up and nowhere to go because you've got the fossil fuel industry running the same way that it's been running, and you've got some of the solar that's being put out in the desert. We want all of that stuff being put in our local communities. So what we want is to bring the jobs back home. We don't want any more of the temporary jobs or the part-time jobs. We want jobs that can support our families with benefits and pathways to long-term careers. We want the same health and safety protections in the workplace. Our vision is that you all don't necessarily need an advanced degree to participate, that we can welcome folks with entry-level positions and also skilled labor like people that have engineering degrees, because we all can participate in the green economy and the green future. And this, for me and for all of us, should be about empowering our communities. We want communities to determine their own futures, their own energy futures. We want to be able to transition off of fossil fuel and get rid of these dirty power plants and oil refineries the way that we want to. We want to demand more solar and energy efficiency. This here is an example of the California Environmental Justice Alliance, my organization. Last year we ran a campaign called Solar for All, and we were fighting to put solar in low-income communities, and the opposition came in and killed our bill. So this is just an example of bringing our communities up to Sacramento. And so the ways that you can participate, you are all can have a role in this. It's not just about some communities that need to benefit, but this is about putting people over profit, and it's getting all of us involved. And so why should you really care, and why should you believe me? I'm just one ordinary person. I went to school. I went to UC San Diego, another UC, just like all of you, graduated about 15 years ago. And like many of you, I fell into the social justice realm because I surrounded myself by people who could educate me and school me. And soon I also became an organizer, and now I'm a coordinator of this really kick-ass social justice organization. And I do this work because of the community and because of all of you, and also for my 8-year-old daughter, who I want to hand off a better future for her and for all of you. And you're all gonna be living in the future, so it's up to all of us really to change the future into what we want it to be. And it's like, when ordinary people like you and me get together collectively to make a powerful movement, one day, I think you all will conquer the corporations and the utilities that are stealing your right to breathe clean air. And I thank you so much for being with me today.
Hi, I'm Theo. And I'm Bridget Kaba, and we're event coordinators for UCSB Fossil Free. We are extremely excited to present our next speaker tonight, the Green Party's 2012 presidential election candidate, Dr. Jill Stein.
Jill Stein is a personal hero of ours. She is a woman who at every stage in her illustrious career, as both a physician and a politician, has stood up for those whose voices are so often ignored. She has spoken truth to power. She has put her principles before political ambition and personal gain. And she has consistently fought against those who put profit before people and planet.
Her position on the front line of the fight against climate change, for health reform, and for green economic revitalization has inspired a generation of young activists.
She is a woman whose protection of the rights of both people and planet has won her many awards and seen her arrested on numerous occasions. Both arrests and awards are the consequences of a determined pursuit of her principles and in what she believes is right, in particular, fairness and grassroots democracy.
She has consistently championed the green economy, calling for investments in new green jobs and quickening the pace in our transition to renewable energies. Concurrently, she has fought against the industries that undermine our health, livelihoods, environment, happiness, and threaten our very existence.
She has shown up the inherent bias and undemocratic nature of a political system in which two increasingly similar parties vie for the money and favor of big business over the interests of the people.
Truly, she's an inspiration for those who have lost hope with the callousness and homogeneity of modern politics.
It is an honor and a privilege to introduce Dr. Jill Stein.
Thank you so much. The honor and privilege is all mine. It's really a delight to be here on Earth Day at the very place where Earth Day was born and really where the modern environmental movement was born. As Strella was saying earlier, that was the oil spill that was heard around the world in 1969, and the fight started here. So thank you, Santa Barbara, for giving us a modern environmental movement. Thank you. Give yourself a round of applause on that. And it's really exciting to be here with the Environmental Affairs Board, which is such an incredible example of students who are standing up and taking their own future in your hands, and the work that you have done with the Fossil Free campaign, with the unanimous approval of your student senate, is very exciting, and hopefully we're gonna see UCSB maybe be the first faculty approval in the UC system, hopefully, at the rate you're going, and then you're gonna shame all the other schools into doing the same thing in their effort to catch up to you. So thank you for leading the charge, and you're really paving the way for all of us. After that spill in 1969, UCSB went on to really be a leader, not only in the environmental movement, but also the anti-war movement, and then in the divestment from South Africa movement, the divestment of the colleges from tobacco, and so on. So, and as well, also in African American studies programs and in Latino studies. So this campus and the UC system has really raised the bar in many ways. So you're following in a proud tradition, you're carrying it on, and your work is unbelievably important. And I'm really waiting on the edge of my seat to see how things continue to go. And I'm expecting Santa Barbara to be achieving some really great things. So keep up your good work. So I wanted to continue on with the theme of the night, and it was wonderful to hear David Austin talk about these very exciting new breakthrough technologies, and to hear Strella then talk about the challenges of environmental justice and the communities who most need and suffer first and the worst from environmental degradation of all sorts, including the impacts of climate change. And I'm going to expand it from there because we have really, more than one crisis going on. And that's why, we're sort of starting to talk, and it's not just me and the work that I do with the Green Party, but I think it's very much the student movement that is looking to redefine the climate movement as fundamentally a justice movement, and that you can't really save the Earth without also addressing people, peace, and the planet. They all go together. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that because it's quite daunting, the challenges that are falling on the shoulders of your generation. It's not only the climate crisis, it's also the jobs crisis and the economy crisis and the student debt crisis. All these things are really very much rolled into one. And the good news is that the solutions also converge. And when we start redefining the goal so that it is more holistic, which is really what the environment is fundamentally about, you start bringing together many constituencies who are also fighting for jobs, who are fighting for quality education in their communities, who are fighting for a livable climate. When people begin to see how these things all converge together, the numbers start becoming really, really impressive. So I want to talk a little bit about the climate struggle within that context of the, creating a world that works for everyone, for people, peace, and the planet, and how students are leading the way. So as you know, there is this incredible surge for democracy and justice, which really is rolling across the planet right now, from the democracy revolutions in the Middle East to the Occupy protests, the 350.org demonstrations, the tar sands protests, the teachers' strikes to stop the privatization of our public schools, to demand respect for teachers, to stop school closures in poor communities and communities of color. The Walmart workers walkout, which was really kind of unprecedented to see the Walmart workers standing up for justice and for respect and for living wages and for the right to form unions. The student movement, which has been such a big part of Occupy, and the demand to end student debt, to start bailing out the students instead of the bankers who got us into this mess to start with. And for free public higher education, because we know actually that it pays for itself. After the Second World War, we provided virtually free public higher education for many people, but especially for returning soldiers. And for every dollar that was spent on public higher education, there was actually $7 in benefits that was returned to the economy. So it's not only the right thing to do and the just thing to do, it also turns out to be an incredibly economic thing to do as well. There's also been a move for housing rights and to stop the evictions of millions and millions of families in this country who were largely victims of predatory lending. And then likewise, there's been a movement to prevent the building of new nuclear power plants and to hurry up and close all of the power plants, really, which are dangerous and should be taken offline. Many of them are old, and many of them are also built with the same model as the Fukushima power plant and are vulnerable to floods, drought, earthquakes, all of the kinds of things that we are seeing, many of them related to climate change. So the surge of people power has been very important for containing nuclear power and for reducing the number of plants. and then also the movement against fracking. And it's very exciting that in New York State, where this battle is really being fought, they have managed to keep extending the moratorium. We should have a ban in New York, setting a precedent really for the whole country. But it is exciting to see that when people actually get out and stand up for what's right, we can actually get what we need, provided we get out and stand up for it. So we have now this uprising for democracy and justice, and as democracy is rising up, people are breaking away from the kind of old politics that just said kind of be quiet and take it and be good little boys and girls. People are breaking away from that to say that, we need a world that works for all of us. So we're starting to see this kind of real tipping point that we're hitting now. A tipping point because, in so many ways, we're up against the breaking point for people, for the planet, for the economy, and for our democracy, that we're facing a breaking point. Virtually whatever direction you look at, we're up against really serious challenges right now. So the idea is, well, maybe we all get together, we can start to turn this breaking point into a tipping point and start taking back the future that we deserve, because the solutions really are there and they're within our reach. And so, part of this breaking point that we're at, is that we've got all these problems and they kind of go together. They interact with each other. And they've been brought to us. This has been a bipartisan gift to all of us. This comes from both sides of the aisle. The Wall Street bailouts, for example, which are much bigger under the current administration than they were under the prior George Bush administration. The continuing unemployment and declining wages. The corporate free trade agreements, which are free if you're a corporation, but if you're a human being, they're extremely costly. And these continue to send American jobs overseas and undermine wages here at home. The attacks on Medicare and Social Security, the expansion of the war, the new drone wars, which are going into Yemen and Somalia and Pakistan and God knows where else, and so on. And then looking especially then at the climate crisis as well. So these are all interacting, and there you are kind of in the middle saying, oh my God, how am I going to deal with all these things? So we're going to see. The good news is that in the same way that the problems converge, the solutions converge. So this is to help you feel like we can actually fix this. And the fix is within our reach. There's one missing ingredient here, and that is sort of people power. Yet we know from poll after poll that this is what people want. They want job creation, not austerity, not attacks on Medicare and Social Security, not more fracking and more pipelines. People really do want a solution to the climate crisis, and they want to create jobs. And the good news is that we can actually do the two. In fact, we can't solve one without the other. So this is the good news. I'm going to just focus on this very briefly. Why is it an economic crisis? Well, the Census Bureau tells us that 1 in every 2 Americans is in or near poverty, that is poverty or low income. 36 million students are in debt, yet 9 out of 10 new jobs, this is according to the Department of Labor, the new jobs coming online are low-wage jobs. They are not living wage jobs. Half of them, in fact, don't even require a high school degree. So this is the kind of economy that we are on track for right now. So to truly solve this, we need to change the economy as we change the energy. And the great news is that these all go together. Likewise, there are, serious racial injustices with 1 out of every 3 young African American men now. either in prison, on parole, or probation. And I just want to describe this briefly. Here's the image that describes the U.S. economy and why it is, what shall we say, in a real uproar, and why that uproar is going to increase. If you had 100 people in the room, and say 100 people represented the whole U.S. population, and then you had 100 loaves of bread, and say that represented all of our resources, how would that be distributed? Well, it turns out it's pretty simple. About 50 loaves would go to one person who's already the most overnourished in the room. That person gets 50 loaves, and then the 50 most malnourished people in the room have one loaf of bread to share. This is actually the reality of the U.S. economy. It's not getting better. It's actually getting worse rather quickly. So it's an established economic crisis. I won't go through current policies, but suffice it to say, we're still bailing out the banks, $85 billion a month right now, $85 billion a month. In a year, that would practically take care of student debt. It would be abolished if we were bailing out the students and not the banks, which hasn't been doing us very much good, et cetera. So this is not solving our economic problem. At the same time, we have a growing climate crisis, which really is upon us. These are figures from that recent report commissioned by 20 at-risk nations presented to the UN about 2 or 3 months ago. Almost 500,000 deaths per year now, including 1,000 children a day that are dying worldwide. And this is mostly in the third world, but many of the impacts are now beginning to come to the States as well. So it's not that far away, and there are enormous economic impacts already. But just a few things about this climate crisis. Altogether, since like the late 1800s, there has been less than 1 degree centigrade of climate warming. Less than 1 degree, and we're seeing all this stuff going on, including the warmest decade on record that we just passed through. And in spite of that happening over the last century, 80% of that climate warming has all happened since 1980, which tells you that this crisis is accelerating. That means it's absolutely time for us to stand up and insist that real solutions are enacted right away, because we got to solve this in real time. It's speeding up. We don't have a lot of time. And above all, it is young people, it is students who really have the moral authority here, because we made the problem, but you got to deal with it. So guess what? You have the moral authority to say what the solution is and when it needs to be implemented. Don't let those folks with gray hair slow you down and tell you you can't do it, because this is your future, and it's within your power right now to stand up and change it. So just a couple words. As you know, in the last 2 years, we've broken all records on storms here in the US and extreme weather, another sign of the acceleration here. So in 2011, we had 14 extreme weather events that cost at least $1 billion each. So that was absolute record-breaking. And then just about that record, a little bit less, was attained in the next year in 2012 too. So the consequences are really coming home to roost right now. We also have mega drought, which I think you're familiar with here in California. This is the new term that the scientists are using to describe the drought, which is not going away, they're telling us. This is drought. This is like the worst drought on record. Basically, that has come home now to the west and the southwest, and that's part of where we are right now. We are, as I mentioned, at less than 1 degree centigrade warming, and what's expected in the next century now is at least 4 degrees centigrade warming, according to the World Bank. According to some other agencies, it'll be 6 degrees. Some of them, a wonderful climate scientist named Kevin Anderson, who is sort of like the Jim Hansen of the United Kingdom. He's great. His stuff is on the web. I strongly recommend looking it up because he tells it like it is, not how people and agencies and government want to hear it. He really tells it like it is. He's saying that probably by 2050, we may see 4 degrees warming. How many people plan to be here in 2050? You betcha. So don't let anybody tell you that you cannot take steps right now to ensure that you have a world to live in 2050. Because according to the scientists right now, they're saying, from 2 to 4 degrees in 2050. And some of what happens at that temperature, okay, so all this stuff we talked about is happening with less than 1 degree warming. This is the International Energy Association, which is saying 6 degrees by 2100. World Bank, 4 degrees. The Hadley Center, 4 degrees by, now they're saying about 2050. So what happens at 4 degrees? You get a 40% reduction in major agriculture. Heat waves will no longer be 105 degrees. They'll be more like 117 or 120 degrees. And you may not recall what went on in the year 2003 in Europe. Anybody remember hearing about the heat waves in Europe then? But basically, there was a protracted heat wave of about 105 degrees for a week, and between 40 and 50,000 people died because what happens, in a sustained heat wave is that your circuits go down, and even if you have cooling, if you're lucky enough to have air conditioning, you don't have it when you most need it. And so this is, these are not things that we can deal with. And these are disturbing facts, but I think it's really important for you to be armed with them. Because when you're talking to the regents or to the faculty about why the UC system needs to divest and why they need to divest now, you just start recounting for them what your world is going to look like if they fail to do that. So this is for you to be well armed for that combat. Another impact, as you know, is the melting of our ice sheets. So this was, 79, yeah. This was 79, the Arctic ice cap here. And this was 2007, so about 30 years later. It's about half gone, and now some are predicting that in as little as the next 10 years, we'll see ice-free Arctic in summers. And what does that mean? Well, when you go from a reflective surface here to a dark blue surface, you're obviously absorbing heat. So this is one of those many tipping points that we are on the verge of hitting. In fact, we're hitting some of them right now. Again, which says, don't let anybody slow you down about what we need to do. Here's another part of the scenario and part of ice melting. These now are ice sheets which are on land. If you go back, this was an ice sheet, in the water. So as it melts, it's not raising the sea level by very much because it's already ice sitting in the water. It's like when the ice melts in your cup. It usually doesn't overflow. But this is something different because these ice sheets are sitting on rock. And as they start to melt, that water all goes into the ocean that wasn't there before. And this is from, this was from an article in Scientific American in 2008, written by the chief polar scientist in the US, who was just discovering at that time how the melting of these ice sheets has remarkably speeded up. And in fact, we now know that over the last 10 to 15 years, the melting of these sheets has increased about 500%. That is fivefold. So this is absolutely staggering how the meltdown of the ice sheets is accelerating. And what you see happening here is the surface of Greenland has all this meltwater, and of course, once it turns to water, it's blue, so it starts absorbing heat instead of reflecting it. So the water becomes warmer, and it begins to bore through the ice. And this is something, it's called a moulin, but you could think of it as an internal waterfall. These are waterfalls, thousands of them, all over the surface of Greenland, which are pouring inside the glacier, going down and then greasing the skids underneath the glacier so that the flow of ice, and ice is always flowing from these glaciers, it's speeding up because now it's sitting on a greased, watery bed, and it's breaking up. And as Jim Hansen says now, all bets are off about when this stuff could break up and what the time course for that will be. We don't know, but, and this is again from that article in Scientific American, what happens when those ice sheets go? Greenland holds 24 feet of sea level elevation. The West Antarctic is 19 feet. The East Antarctic is 170 feet. So, you're talking hundreds of feet of sea level elevation. And Hansen points out that, you could see this occur within a several-year period. Now, that's not to say it's going to start anytime soon, but we don't know when. The point is, we don't want to get there. We don't want to get anywhere close to these kinds of impacts. That's why we have to start reversing the process right now. What does that mean? That means no more fossil fuels. That means no new forms of carbon, no tar sands, no fracking, no more offshore oil, no Arctic exploration, and you know now why we have to do that. It's really important to start moving right now to an emergency jobs program in clean energy creation, which includes exactly the kinds of jobs that Strela was talking about that can put millions of people to work, actually, insulating our homes, weatherizing them, as well as manufacturing the renewable energy, the solar cells and the wind towers and all that. During the Second World War, after Pearl Harbor happened, you know what happened to the automobile factories? They were converted into war factories. And, people did that because it was a national emergency. Well, we have a national emergency right now. There is a climate war going on. We are under attack, and this might be a really good time to start converting not only our car factories, but our bomber factories as well, to fight the war that we really need to fight. That is to stop climate change. And we will get that only by asking for it. So don't be shy. Don't be hoodwinked into thinking it's not cool to stand up and say, you demand a future. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But first, here's my hometown, Boston, what it would look like basically if Greenland melted. So there it is right now. And this is with 20 feet. So this is about what it would look like if Greenland went. And then that's at 40 feet. So that's like Greenland and the West Antarctic. So, and Boston is one of the, we are not a terribly low elevation. On the West Coast here, you're generally at higher elevation, so it's not like you're going to be inundated, but there will be other things going on. In the US, actually, it's 5 million people who live within 4 feet of sea level elevation. And in fact, right now, scientists are saying in the next century, by 2100, we may actually see 6 feet of elevation. So you can imagine the kind of chaos that will ensue as sea level starts to rise. And there's no question about which communities are most vulnerable, and of course that is always the low income and communities of color that are living in the most vulnerable sites. And again, here, just by way of arming you with the science, this is thousands of years, okay? So here's now, this goes back about 400,000 years in time, and these are carbon levels in the atmosphere that have been going up and down with the ice ages. And then here we are in the last ice age where we warmed, and all those ice sheets, they shrank to where we know them, and this is pretty much where civilization evolved, right here. And boom, this is what has happened with the Industrial Revolution. So you can see our carbon levels have increased way faster than anything that has ever occurred in nature. This is extremely unnatural and extremely stressful, and not, this is not a product of nature. This is a product of human activity right here. And this is why we cannot open up new sources of carbon. We cannot afford to keep going up there, especially when we have real solutions that we can implement now. And this is just to make the point that what the current political establishment is talking about is not okay. Even the federal commitment, which is not being enacted, but what they gave lip service to was 17% below 2005 levels, which is nothing. It's nada when you translate it to what we know about the science and what it calls for, which is actually 40% reductions over 1990 levels. So this is just kind of fancy numbers intended to make you think that they were going to do something, but this amounts to virtually nothing. And the explicit policy of the current White House right now is all of the above. Nature does not really care about renewable energy. Nature reads greenhouse gases. So it's not okay. You can't balance greenhouse gases by also doing some clean energy. They don't balance each other out. It's like saying, oh, I'm going to give my child an all of the above diet. And I'm going to give them some lead and some pesticides and some arsenic and some blueberries and spinach. It doesn't work that way. You can't undo the bad stuff with some good energy. You have to draw down on the toxic and poisonous energy. So that all of the above policy is not okay. Likewise, the Keystone Pipeline, the free trade agreements that sort of lock us into fossil fuel energy development and so on, all of this has to be resisted. And I won't say more on this except to say that the climate leadership is not there. A word on the tar sands. The conventional wisdom was that this was going to create a lot of jobs, but actually when you looked at it, it was a couple thousand, this is according to the State Department, it was going to be a couple thousand temporary jobs, but permanent jobs were estimated to be about the number 20 permanent jobs, because this is a highly automated project. So it's actually not creating jobs, yet it's turning pristine forest into this toxic wasteland. It uses huge amounts of fresh water at a time when we're having protracted drought. It's high risk for toxic spills. It refines much more toxic, and it's much more harmful to the low income and communities of color where these refineries and these toxic sites exist. And when it burns, it emits far more CO2 than conventional sources. So all of this is why we have to stop that. And you may know, did anybody go to Washington, D.C. for the, all right, wow. Great, some real troopers there. But while tens of thousands of us were there to say, stand up to big oil, unfortunately, the president was golfing with big oil, which is why we, really need to say it's not okay. And this is, again, what a fracking pad looks like. And when they come into your communities, they transform them into a industrial wasteland. These are highly polluting. They put out very toxic emissions related to the toxic stuff that gets sent into the ground. It comes back up, it's emitted. These things are noisy, they deteriorate your roads, and they destroy and use up your water supply. So it is a public relations campaign, basically, being conducted by the industry, which has a lot of money to spend. So this is not the solution for the future. This is the solution for the future, a Green New Deal that will rescue our economy and our climate. People say, oh, but we don't have the money to do that. Well, this is actually modeled on the New Deal that got us out of the Great Depression. And you think we don't have money now. We were really out of money during the Great Depression. Things were much worse. But we found the money actually to create millions of jobs. It would be the equivalent of creating about 24 million jobs, which is what we need right now in order to have a full employment economy. We need not only a livable climate, we need a livable and just economy, and we can create them both. So a Green New Deal is an emergency plan. It would create 25 million good wage, living wage jobs, put everyone back to work who needs a job and wants to work. It would jumpstart the green economy and put a halt to climate change. And by the way, it makes wars for oil obsolete. And just imagine that. Instead of spending $1 trillion a year on this massive military-industrial security complex, that could be cut back in half to about where it was in the year 2000. We'd still be outspending the next biggest spender by 600%. We'd have all that we need, and we'd have $500 billion to put into what we need to do here at home, creating these jobs. And these jobs, by the way, include the jobs in the green economy, and that means the weatherization, as Strella was demonstrating before, these conservation jobs, insulation, solar panels, installations, wind, which is not shown here, as well as the factories to make them. We need a clean and green agricultural economy as well, which is a healthy economy. It doesn't poison our farm workers, our water supplies, or our land, and actually creates a healthy, local, resilient, fresh food supply. And another mainstay of this green economy is public transportation as well as active transportation, so we can safely bike and walk in between transit hubs. So we call also for the social jobs that we need to make our communities socially sustainable, and that means hiring back our teachers, our nurses, childcare after school, drug abuse, rehabilitation and prevention, violence rehab and prevention as well. The whole spectrum of jobs that we need in order to have sustainable communities. Together with the Green New Deal, we also call for an economic Bill of Rights, including Medicare for all, ending student debt, tuition-free public higher education, and a moratorium on foreclosures. There are a variety of financial and democracy reforms that I won't go through. Just want to make the point that the cost is, it's about $500 billion a year for a full employment economy. So this would actually get the job done. This was less than the cost of the first stimulus package, which was around 700-some billion. It's less than that cost, and it would create a full employment economy that would also put a halt to climate change. So this is doable. These are some of the ways it can be paid for, downsizing the military. How about we put a small sales tax on Wall Street? It's the only sector of the economy that doesn't pay a sales tax. You and me are paying about 10% on a sales tax on average, whereas Wall Street isn't paying anything. If they paid even a tiny 0.5%, it would generate about $350 billion a year, which would take us a long way towards the cost of actually jump-starting a solution to the economic and climate crises that we're facing. There are other really important policies that need to happen for a definitive fix here. The carbon fee and dividend is something a lot of people have heard about from Jim Hansen, putting a small tax on carbon at its source, at its point of entry, which is easy and efficient, and that money would be rebated basically back to taxpayers. So it's essentially a revenue neutral program, but it puts a burden on the cost of fossil fuels so it more approximates its actual cost. Because right now we're putting huge subsidies into fossil fuels, over $500 billion a year here in the US, according to the IMF report that came out just 2 weeks ago. So by getting rid of those subsidies and actually putting a real price on carbon, we can drive the energy sector into the renewable energy economy. And I should just mention the divestment campaigns, which are a really important part of the solution because it raises the bar for all of us. The colleges aren't going to do it alone, but you can get it going. And by achieving divestment at the level of the colleges, you really, you put a moral, what shall we say, you raise the bar, you raise the standard for our communities, for our cities and towns, our states, and our nation to follow in suit. So these are just some of the pictures. And a quick comment, justice. We talk about environmental justice, we talk about racial and economic justice. There's another kind of justice that compounds those, and that is generational justice. Because there are so many disadvantages now that are being passed on to the younger generation, it's really important, I think, for you to be able to stand up and say, this is just not okay, this is not fair, and we're going to demand justice. Justice on debt, justice on education, justice on jobs, and justice on climate. And let me just skip to the punchline here. This is Frederick Douglass, one of the leaders of the abolition movement, who made this saying that I think you're probably familiar with. Yes? Are people familiar with this? Maybe not. Okay, well, you'll want to get familiar with it because it was true at the time of slavery, and it is absolutely as true today that power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. That doesn't mean you have to be nasty, but it does mean that you definitely want to raise the bar. They're not going to fix it for you. As young people who are inheriting the world of 2050, you're living in a completely different frame of reference from those of us who lived in a world of 1950 and 1980 and the year 2000. Your frame of reference is completely different. And real change, real transformational change has always been driven by young people. So, and that goes for the civil rights movement as well as the ending of the Vietnam War, the South African apartheid fight. All of it has always been fought. The democracy revolutions in the Middle East right now, they are being led by young people. So this is your This is your privilege, this is your opportunity, this is your responsibility, and no one else's. And for you to be clear on that enables you to come into the conversation with a whole lot of conviction and to ensure that you are setting the agenda, and no one should be allowed to get in your way. So the last comment here is from Alice Walker, that one of the biggest ways people give up power is by not knowing they have it to start with. I think you have it. You clearly have it. There are 37 million young people who are in debt. That alone, right there, is enough to transform any public debate, any election, any issue. The terms that young people are coming into this struggle with are extremely motivating, and that creates really the opportunity of a lifetime and gives us the chance to turn this breaking point that we face into the tipping point that we need to take back our democracy and the peaceful, just, green future that really is within our reach. So go get them. UCSB, you're going to do great things. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle Fischler, and I'm the Campus Affairs Coordinator with the Environmental Affairs Board. I'll be your moderator for tonight. I'd like to invite back up to the stage all of the speakers to answer some questions from you, the audience. So if you could all come back up here and have a seat. I want to thank all of you and the speakers for being here tonight. I know the commute was long for some of you and just a bike ride away for the others. And so we're going to start with a few questions. Some of them are directed, some of them are for everybody. And once you answer, if anybody else has something to chime in with, feel free to go ahead. The first one is for Mr. Austin. Why is it important for UCSB to be the leader of the clean energy movement? And where do you see us headed today and in the future?
Why is it important for UCSB to be the leader? Well, there are lots of reasons why. First of all, we are the leader in many ways, and one of the reasons for it is that it's not widely known, but UCSB's expertise in various energy-related fields is very high. In fact, if you look at recent rankings of where UCSB stands, one that came out just last week that I'll mention to you, which is quite important, is that it was done by the University of Leiden in Europe. They surveyed 500 universities around the world and looked at the impact of their science and technology, and UCSB was actually second in the world in that ranking. That's no small matter. We're not big like Stanford and MIT, but we have very high quality faculty. And most important, we have the expertise in the materials area that is so critical to developing new renewable energy. And we're planning to do more. You asked where we headed. I think that you'll see, as we have been doing, a lot of new innovations, more efficient solar cells. We're also working on something that's kind of neat. It's a plastic solar cell, and in fact, you might even be wearing solar cells in the future if people can turn this into wearable items. But there's just a whole range of activity going on at UCSB that is not widely known, and it's going to have, and it already is having, very great impact.
Thank you very much. The next one is for Dr. Stein. What will be our biggest obstacle in transitioning in a low to a low carbon economy, and how do we tackle it, both as a national and global society?
Great question. I mean, in my view, we can get moving right now, you know, in the same way that at the time of the Great Depression, we started creating millions of jobs. And just to undertake, for example, energy conservation and weatherization, the kinds of jobs that Strella was talking about, that could be undertaken right now on a massive national basis. And it repays, you know, it for itself very quickly. To look at Germany, Germany actually created a national program to basically solarize everything as quickly as possible. They created a system called feed-in tariff, which is a way basically for the community to fund the installations. And it brought down the cost of solar enormously. It created so many jobs that the Conservative Party started complaining about it because everybody was getting employed. They were driving unemployment, you know, down towards zero. It worked so well, you know, it's just shocking that we're not doing this now. So I guess in my view, I think the only obstacle to really surging forward right now is our, you know, like that last slide said, our failing to recognize that we have the power now. And we do. When you look at the numbers of people who want really fundamental, real solutions to climate change, that's a substantial majority. And in fact, polls show that people think we should be creating jobs right now, not creating austerity and cutting government programs and school teachers and healthcare. People want to create jobs, they want to solve the climate problem. We need a Green New Deal right now, and I think it's just a matter of us standing up and saying it's time.
And as a follow-up question to all three of you, what can a bunch of college students do? Do we just get jobs and go into the green economy, or what are your suggestions for us? And I guess more broadly, the average Santa Barbara community.
I'll start. So I think that there's something called, you know, when I was organizing, there's a 1,001 ways that you can plug in or participate or become active. I think that there are a number of community organizations. So I have an organization called the California Environmental Justice Alliance. We are looking for people all the time to help support our campaigns. There's UC for Clean Energy, UCSB, Fossil Free. I mean, I think that the places that you can start are right here in this room. And you know, there are a number of ways from just simply signing petitions to becoming fully engaged in all of these different coalitions and campaigns. And so I think that there's a number of ways that people can really participate. Don't hold back. And you know, now that a lot of young people have they're the best opportunities for young people because you've got all kinds of education at your disposal, at your fingertips, and a lot of opportunity and energy to do it. And so go and grab it when you see it. Once you get out into the working world, sometimes it's often hard to find. So approach some of us before you leave. Is what I'm saying.
Thank you very much. This one is for Ms. Servas. What has been your greatest challenge in being an environmental advocate?
I think the biggest challenge is, you know, right now my position is I direct the energy component of our coalition. It's a huge campaign. We're up against big fossil fuel corporations like the Chevrons of the world or BPs of the world, and then the big utilities like Southern California Edison or PG&E or San Diego Gas and Electric, who maybe have a different opinion of how we want to transition off of fossil fuel. So I'm not a technical person, but my job is I have to understand all of this energy policy that becomes very technically complex, and then have to break that down because I'm also an organizer and I have to be able to communicate that to people like you on a day-to-day basis. So that's one. The second is just organizing, and it's sometimes you can become impatient, but we all know that we have the power that's in our hands, and it's a day-to-day process. It's a step-by-step process, and if you one day become an organizer or are interested in supporting, and before you know it you are, think that you're organizing, just know that it's a step-by-step process, but it's all worthwhile.
Thank you. And this one also is related to environmental justice, but also where we are in Santa Barbara and everybody here, we're going to FIME establishment. We have a bit of money to throw around. How can we help low-income communities defend themselves against fossil fuel companies? And what can we, or what should we be doing with our privilege to make a difference? Do we just throw money at the problem? Do we just join environmental groups on campus? What can we do both in and outside our community?
So I'm assuming the question is directed to me?
It can be to anybody. If anybody can speak to that.
Well, I think everything that you just said about connecting with environmental justice organizations and working to hold the Chevrons of the world accountable and stop the fracking from coming into the communities. It's sort of like pick your favorite issue. Healthy, local, organic community gardens and food supplies and things like that. There's just a lot of action going on now in low-income communities and communities of color that are really, rising up and are being real trendsetters right now in taking on the power and developing community resilience and independence. So there's so much that we can do to help those communities. And I would also throw in a word for considering political action. That doesn't mean it's the only thing that you do, but it is one way that helps cross-link these various struggles. Because what the kind of established power will do, the status quo will try to play them off of each other. It'll be the fight for jobs against the fight for the environment, against the fight for schools, against the fight for healthy food. But actually they all go together. My training, is as a medical doctor, and I worked in the clinic for about 25 years. Nobody ever came into the clinic and said, just take care of my kidneys, I don't care about the rest of me. We are whole people, we live in whole communities, we need food, we need water, we need air, we need energy, we need jobs, we need education, they all go together. And I used to run from one issue to the other thinking, oh my God, how are we ever going to fix this one? How will we ever get to critical mass? And then I realized the name of the game was all about building coalitions. It's all about creating an agenda that unifies us. That is how we get to critical mass. And that's when the light bulb went off in my head. Oh, so that's what political parties are supposed to be. They're supposed to be how everyday people get to power. Not the big money, but everyday people, about how we come together as people who need jobs and education and to get out of debt and to keep a roof over our heads and all that. It's about building that coalition across issues, across time, across geography, and across generations, and then working on that. And it's kind of nice because that way you don't feel like, oh my God, how can I possibly cover the waterfront? You don't have to. You work on your favorite issue and other people work on the other ones, and it all goes together nicely. So if you're interested in exploring that route, you can go to my website. It's just, all you have to remember is my name, jillstein.org, and you can plug in through there if you want to look at the political empowerment route, which personally I think is really important because we can work our tails off on the issues, But if we can't get a responsive political system, we're kind of stuck. So that's where we really make change.
Thank you, Dr. Just briefly, I'd like to add to that, first of all, what students at UCSB are doing today is very, very impressive, in my opinion. The TGIF fund and what you have done, for example, with regard to the work at the Student Resources Building, the solar panel array that is going up on parking lot 20, the initiative that Chelsea and Ross and their colleagues are putting forward to set a goal for the campus to be completely self-sufficient in terms of renewable energy in the next few decades. All of this is, in my opinion, just very laudable, and I think there are a few campuses that can compare to what's happening here. I want to just say thank you for everything you're doing, and do more of it here, and then connect with your colleagues on other campuses, and as my colleagues here on the stage have said, then go beyond that and connect nationally as well, because I think you've got here at UCSB already the core of a very, very successful movement.
Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have for you tonight. Let's give our speakers a round of applause.
Great. Thank you again to our speakers. This has been very wonderful to hear all you have to say. We are very quickly approaching the end of our program for tonight, but we wanted to sort of spice it up. So we're going to say to something we think that you have never, ever heard in this lecture hall. Please take your phones out and turn them on if they're off.
Okay, so we have the question for you that will end the night. How will you help UCSB in the clean energy movement and in the community? So text the number 314-189 in the body of your text message, and then your text message to the number 37607. So that's fun.
So text to the number 37607, and in the body of the message it will say 314-189 and your commitment. Problems in modern society.
Obviously, you guys are texting. Yay! Okay.
Woo! So we got one to come in.
Can we applaud all the answers that are coming in, please? All the great, too.
Well, all right. We know that for the future at least. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So without too much further ado, we know everyone is... Oh, wonderful. We want to thank you all for coming out this evening, and we hope that everyone got something out of this event. I know I personally did a lot. Please take everything you learned back to your apartments, to your dorms, to your family, friends, and keep talking about it, and let's find toward clean energy.
Yeah, and just one last thing. As you look around, you can obviously see that there are a lot of empty spaces. So as you all know, we live in a very apathetic world, so I challenge you all to make everyone around you care and make everyone around you get knowledgeable and educated on this issue, because you are the change that the world needs to see, but we need a larger movement, we need a stronger movement, and it's up to you all, not just the ones putting on this event, but the ones that attend and learn today, to go spread that knowledge and to create an even larger movement. So please do that, and thank you all for coming.
And please go eat the food in the lobby.
Yeah, there's a lot of food.
Thank you.